video if you don't want to be spoiled for Paper Mario and the Origami King. They're coming right now. Gotcha. Hi, sorry, I didn't see you there. I was busy playing Paper Mario, the Origami King for my Nintendo Switch. Huh? Get it? I really like Paper Mario, the Origami King. Before the game launched, I thought that would end up being a controversial opinion, but it seems like everybody's really enjoying it for the game that it is. Nobody's calling it a masterpiece or anything, and the legacy of the series past will always linger. But it's a genuine blast and I'm really glad I got to experience it. I honestly can't recommend it enough to fans of Mario games or just adventure games in general. But there is one aspect of the game that not everybody seems to love, to put it gently. That aspect, of course, would be the game's combat. But I'm not talking about that today. Instead, I want to focus on another area of controversy, which is the Legion of Stationery, a series of boss battles that are, on the surface, just fights with photorealistic art supplies. I can totally understand why people don't love these, but while I was skeptical at first, by the end of the game, they actually turned out to be my favorite part of the whole experience in pretty much every way. And here's why. So quick backstory, I don't want to focus too much on the early Paper Mario games, but it's important to bring up the first three here in order to explain why the Legion of Stationery is so polarizing in the first place. So Paper Mario 64, The Thousand Year Door, and Super Paper Mario were all praised by critics and adored by fans for their oddball cast of characters, including unusual boss battles that didn't always rely on typical Mario mainstays. Sure, there were King Goombas and all that, but those relatively generic ones were alongside wild and memorable boss battles with brand new characters or fresh takes on existing Mario baddies such as... So, when Sticker Star and Color Splash started introducing more generic boss characters alongside their increasingly generic supporting characters, it didn't go over very well with fans. I mean, I feel like it's fair to say that enemies like Hooktail and Rock Hawk, with their unique characterizations and designs, are inherently preferable to newer baddies such as Big Boo and Steak. So when the second trailer for Origami King chose to show off its new boss battles featuring colored pencils and rubber band, it was... That's some No! No! Tape! Are you kidding me? Oh. It certainly led to a less than stellar response online, and I will admit I was more than a little unhappy with the decision. Especially considering the fact that the rest of the game looked really solid. The creepy atmosphere, the tease of partners kinda returning, the combat, which I thought looked really cool. But I already said I'm not talking about that today! So I thought I'd be really disappointed with the stationary enemies when the game finally came out. And I was! I really was. But as my time in the world of the game went on, and I found myself more invested in the story and general happenings, I realized how beneficial they were to the overall experience in a variety of ways. Who would have thought? I'm gonna start by praising some aspects of these characters that weren't really up for debate to begin with. First of all, when speaking in terms of mechanics and gameplay, I think a majority of people would likely bring up these boss encounters as one of the game's highlights, and I totally agree. I love how open-ended the fights can be, finding solutions to these challenges. One of the coolest things I realized early on is that you can pretty much always fudge these battles to walk in a direct line from your spot outside the ring right to the boss. But doing so won't result in you picking up as many goodies along the way, and some of those goodies are essential to doing well in the fight, such as the hint envelopes and attack boosts. In addition, unlike the Vellumental fights, which tend to have one ideal solution, you can occasionally strategize your choices in ways that feel more open than the rest of the game's combat. Like with the Stapler, for example, you can use several different attacks, though jumping or the Thousand-Arm Fold are preferential to using your hammers. You're not bogged down with having to solve a puzzle in one set way. You can strategize based on what's going on around you and which goodies you want to prioritize picking up. Fun stuff! In addition, the Legion of Stationery often manipulate or mess with the ring that you're battling on, throwing additional obstacles that you won't find throughout the rest of the game. I felt like those extra challenges were very unique. I really enjoyed how they shook it up for these moments, but it never felt like it was something that I couldn't overcome by just thinking about it for a little. And the game threw enough tools at me to help me succeed if I was ever truly stumped. Also, I really need to say that the music in these battles, particularly the back half, are some of the best tracks I think I've ever heard in a Mario game, and quite a few of them have entered my workout playlist permanently. They're so upbeat, so energetic, and all of them manage to perfectly reflect the design and characterization of the stationary item they're paired with. And speaking of characterization, the main complaint against these enemies is characterization. As I explained earlier, people weren't happy with the reveal of these things because compared to the first 3 games' bosses, they came off as too silly and tongue-in-cheek. They also served as a stark reminder for what these games used to be, and how wonderful the antagonist designs could get back in the day. But I gotta say, for what they were working with, they nailed the characters of each and every one of the Legion. First of all, they all have unique personalities, titles, and the colored pencils even have a name. Imagine that, an enemy in a Paper Mario game with an actual name. That's rare now for some reason. The pencils talk like a pretentious artist, the tape is stereotypically Italian-American for some reason, and the scissors are a noble swordsman type who wants to fight fair, but when you prove your strength to him, he comes at you with everything he has. Also, in terms of personality, I really enjoyed how all of them were introduced. I like the colored pencils leaving behind suspicious artwork throughout the lighthouse where you meet him, or them, I guess. I think the actual pencil box is who you're technically fighting, but it's several colored pencils inside. So I guess I'm just gonna say them. Anyway, I love the rubber bands kidnapping Toads and forcing them to watch his weird stage plays. Speaking of Toads, I love the hole puncher literally mutilating 40 of them, just straight up stealing their faces and letting them walk around as zombies. Which reminds me, does anybody else get the impression that the game's whole thing against Toads is a response to fans complaining about Sticker Star and Color Splash having way too many of them? I do feel like the developers were throwing us a bone, creating excessive violence against Toads for our amusement. And I gotta admit, if that's what they were going for, I appreciated it. But going back to personality, I find it pretty remarkable that the developers were able to find qualities that perfectly matched each office supply. Like, for example, a stapler posing as a vicious guard dog. It makes perfect sense. Its mannerisms, its attacks, everything about it fit with what they were going for so well that I legitimately forgot I was just fighting a realistic looking stapler. Same with the hole puncher, which is a disco fanatic and dances when you fight it. I don't know how or why, but a disco hole puncher just kind of makes sense. And it leads to these enemies somehow managing to have more personality than even Ollie, the game's main antagonist, whose single defining trait is that he's a disgusting racist. The other thing about these characters would be their place in the story. Ever since Sticker Star, the Paper Mario series has embraced its paper aspects more and more with each entry. A lot of people don't like this change because, as fans will be quick to point out, the paper was more of an artistic choice than anything in the first 3 games. But Color Splash and now Origami King are so pretty and so creative. They really push the paper theme to its limits, and for that I honestly don't mind it at all. Also, all of the origami in the game can be recreated in real life, and that's just really cool. But all of that being said, when the stationary characters were announced, it seemed like it was just another decision that served no real purpose beyond the cutesy paper thing. And again, I agreed at first, but then about halfway through the game, you meet Ollie's creator, a Toad called Craftsman Toad, who I desperately wish was any character other than a goddamn unnamed Toad. But when you speak to the Craftsman Toad, he gives you a small piece of information that explains everything you need to know about the Legion of Stationary's role in the story. His exact words being, "It seems he, Ollie, also ran off with my best origami making tools." And look, Origami King doesn't have an Oscar-worthy story or anything like that, not at all, but this subtle piece of dialogue does a lot of heavy lifting. Ollie, who resents his creator for giving him life and then writing on him, decides that he will assert his power by folding the Mushroom Kingdom into his image, while vowing revenge against all Toads due to the actions of the craftsman. Again, racism has no place in the Mario universe, I condemn that. All that being said, it makes absolutely perfect sense that in his efforts to morph the paper-crafted Mushroom Kingdom into a world that represents his origami self, he steals tools belonging to an origami craftsman, gives them life, their overtly dramatic personalities as well, and uses them to unleash absolute Toad genocide. Because at the end of the day, what's worse for a paper-based being than a giant pair of scissors, or a hole puncher, or the rest? These are basically just giant, brutal, talking weapons Ollie has unleashed upon the world, and they work perfectly not only with his character, but within the story the game is telling as well. And again, I really want to stress my feelings about this game's narrative. The story of Origami King has a pretty strong foundation. Unfortunately, it never seems fully eager to push past that foundation. So what we get is a very intriguing, but very bare bones overall story. But this explanation for the Legion of Stationary elegantly explains their origins, their behaviors, and their motivations, and pushes them way beyond just being talking office supplies. They really ended up feeling like the exact thing this story needed. And with all of that being said, I want to end the video by saying this. If it were up to me personally, I would prefer the Paper Mario series to go back to the style of bosses from the first 3 games. Those characters were just oozing with creativity, personality, and they were very unique for the Mario universe. I think we can all agree with that. But I really do believe that it all comes down to this. The Origami King is a game that succeeds at doing what it wants to do. It is fun in its own way, even if it doesn't always harken back to what people wish the game would be more like. And I do believe that for the story that this game is trying to tell, and the gameplay style that this game is trying to pull off, the Legion of Stationery are pretty much perfect. They are exactly what they should have been, and they make the experience so much better because of it. So with that being said, if you weren't a fan of them to begin with, or you're still not a fan of them now, maybe that changed your mind, maybe it didn't. Let me know in the comments. But I want to end this by reminding you that I am one of the 3 people in the world who really loves the puzzle combat of Origami King. And for that reason, if you want to throw away everything else I said in this video, go right ahead. I don't blame you. I have no credibility.